Hello, everyone. Welcome to Dojo Talks. Today we are talking the World Championship match that just concluded today between Magnus Carlsen and Jan Nepomniachtchi. We're going to get into our overall thoughts on the match, and then we're actually going to be kind of like reading all the different actors in this match, including the players, the commentary, the press, and so on, and the fans too. We'll be rating the fans. So let's get into it. Let me start with Jesse because you were following the match almost every day live on the channel. So what were your overall impressions on the match?
Yeah, I thought it was a really enjoyable match as a fan. I think it was just kind of cool and encouraging for classical chess that there was so much interest in the match. And one of the hilarious things about it to me was, well, not hilarious, but in earlier dojo talks, Kostya said the dumbest thing he's ever said. But for a second, I was like, oh man, maybe he's right. I'm having some self-doubt. What did he say? He said that maybe we shouldn't even do a world championship match. Maybe world championship matches should just be a tournament. There's no need to have a match. And I gave this long spiel about why they were cool and the psychological drama and how there's a reason why people get into it and the tension between the two players that you don't feel in a tournament, that it just takes on a whole new level where you got to face the same guy the next day and you get this psychological drama build up. And I feel like I was right, Kostya, and you were wrong, but what a great match. What a great match. And, for the same reasons that the World Championship match has always been such a compelling event with psychology, with physical endurance in a way that you just don't have in normal tournaments, and a lot of it is the psychological fact of having to face the same guy, sometimes the same opening, a lot of times in these world championship matches. And I feel like that happened here too, where Jan had a really hard time facing, let's call it the Marshall version of the Rui that Magnus had put together. And just like, for example, Kasparov not being able to break the Berlin Wall in 1999 versus Kramnik. Similar kind of situation, similar psychological torment when you can't break through and then you lose your mind. And yeah, I'm going to talk more about it, but I thought it was amazing. Also, just because of the explosion in chess and the ability for everybody to do the streaming. Like I was one of hundreds of people doing streaming, a variety of very strong GMs, Yobava, Ivanchuk, all kinds of people, John Spielman, doing their own Twitch streams. Beautiful. I thought it was just a real festival of the game in a way that we don't see the level of interest in any other event. And myself as a fan too. That's the one event, the only event that's second to this will be the candidates tournament. And that's going to be this coming summer. I think that'll also be beautiful. But this is, of course, the reason why the candidates tournament is fun, because we get to see who gets to play Magnus again.
Okay, let me just clarify because I feel like this whole thing has been so overblown. No, I really like the match too, and in general, I've always liked the World Championship match tradition. You got to unseat the world champion. I've always liked that. What I was trying to say last time is there's just tons of problems with it, and I still think it doesn't make sense to decide the world champion in this huge match and then decide a candidate in this like one random tournament where not all the best players get in. It's like such a important process to be treated like not a lottery, but like you really have to go through a lot of hoops to get to the end. In the candidates tournament, that hasn't produced the second best player in the world multiple times as the challenger, or sometimes hasn't even produced the best player in the world. That was my point. It's just that there's a lot of issues with it. But I do like the match, and I did like this match very much. It's always some of my favorite times. I started following World Championships, I think, really closely, maybe with like Anand Gelfand. But then really, I enjoy them as a fan, starting with when Magnus started to play in 2013. So for me, they've been very, very special. David, how about you? What do you think?
I think that the match was probably awesome, but unfortunately for me personally, I missed
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. So, I think it was probably great. I definitely saw some like exciting snippets. Um, you know, I popped onto Twitter now and then, and it seemed like everybody was really excited. So I feel like it had that piece Jesse was alluding to, of like it was like a big deal and people were like in on it. Everybody's looking at the same thing, talking about the same thing. There's like this feeling like 100 million people across the world are all watching something together, which is pretty crazy feeling. So I think it was probably awesome, but I definitely have a strong feeling of having missed out.
Yeah, it seemed like every day there was like a new story or a new exciting thing happening. And yeah, there's nothing more fun than following the game live and then following on like Twitter, and then like something happens and like everyone's tweeting about it at the same time. It was, yeah, unfortunately I didn't get to catch most of the games. I could only catch like the tail end, but that would always be the first thing I check in the morning, even though they tell you not to check your phone in the morning. But I would check Twitter to see what happened in the World Championship. And unfortunately, some days I woke up, it wasn't that late, but I checked Twitter and I couldn't even figure out who won, because people were just like talking about all kinds of other stuff related to the match, like the press conferences and all this stuff maybe we'll get into. So yeah, some days it was actually hard to find the result. Just kind of funny. And usually it was a drawn game that day, usually.
Yeah, and one thing I'll say that at the dojo, one of the things that I was doing as the commentary, and this was partly for selfish purposes, was not to use the computer at all. But the really genius thing about watching it live is once you digest the games after they've been processed through the media will create a narrative that's based on, by media I just mean people tweeting and stuff, will create a narrative, and the memes that were created that was based on what they saw as the computer best move. And what's so cool, I think, is first try to form your own opinion, and then in the press conference to see what the players thought. And one of the nice things about this event where there were multiple games where we went to the press conference and the players clearly had a different sense, a divergent sense of what the evaluation of the position was. Jan in particular was, in general, overly optimistic about his chances in a variety of positions. So that was like a really interesting tension, and just, interesting, like, and then you kind of look at what the other people were thinking. And yeah, there was amongst the commentary community of the stronger GMs, there's a divergent opinion as well on a variety of positions. So there was this beautiful debate in terms of watching it live that I didn't anticipate. And it was really nice to have once I was inside of it,
Yeah, I think one of the best things in all of chess is when people can argue, right? And so like if you can have Magnus and Carlsen play moves that are really, really at this high level, and then you can have GMs sort of like who can't agree about the moves and argue back and forth about it, that's like, just this huge clash of ideas, which I think is fantastic. And I think that often the computer evaluations kind of collapse those discussions. So that for me, it's very important to like have my own take on the game first before being exposed to other people's takes. Now, if I could have watched it live, I would have been happy to watch it with, a strong player and hear their opinions while thinking for myself. But I feel like if you click into something that's sort of more general, like on Twitter, where lots of opinions have been mashed together and sort of come out, that's too much of sort of a spoiler, and that I don't want to get till I play through the game. And then I always, go back and see the comments, and people are like, what an unbelievable blunder. And I'm like, I didn't notice it. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it really kills all the intrigue when the computer evals enter the chat, because it's like okay, someone blunders according to the engine, then one person says it, everyone starts repeating it, and all of a sudden it's such an obvious blunder because everyone can see it. It's like without the engine, the players are playing at such a different level, and it's really a shame because this game 6 was extremely fascinating. It was so fun to watch. Like we watched it live. It was such an epic game, and a lot of people there, or a lot of fans, I should say, their understanding of the game was that like, oh, Nepo blundered in a drawn endgame. That was the story of Game 6. Nepo blundered in a drawn endgame. It's crazy. It's just such a distorted view of what actually happens in like a real life chess game, and that game had so many like ups and downs. So yeah, just to boil it down to like the computer mistakes is always kind of a shame. But I think you get that kind of stuff in all sports, so it's not something that's exclusive to chess. Fans can have all kinds of different takes, and sometimes the popular takes aren't the most intelligent ones, but that's what happens.
Yeah, and actually, go ahead. Well, okay, so I was going to jump in. I was say Game 6 might be an interesting way to talk about what we think the overarching narratives of the match are. So, for example, Nepo, in the concluding press conference, does a psychological dodge on himself, and he says, I lost this match for non-chess reasons. And I'm like, really, Nepo, buddy? You lost it for non-chess reasons? I disagree strongly. There are some very interesting things, though, to do with experience where Magnus was evil. And one of the things about Game 6 that was truly evil is Magnus openly said, I wanted to take the game as long as possible, to push this guy to the very end and then expect a mistake. And that is exactly what happened. I mean, Game 6, oh man, in terms of not just quality of play, but like the intention of taking a dude to the very end and dropping him off the edge of the earth. Oh man, it's incredible. I mean, it's just a thing of competitive beauty, a thing that you will not get in a tournament, by the way. That is an intention that has everything to do with the match and pushing your opponent over the edge.
Right.
Yeah.
In a tournament, it does you no good to tire out somebody like crazy who's then going to play a different opponent. And then you're just going to be tired when you play your next opponent. Like you don't gain anything.
Right. So one of the things that I want to say that I think will be very hard to meet Magnus in a match, and you'd have to really understand the way he approaches this, is the man is evil. And it's interesting because he's got like a real almost autistic sense of endgame simple positions, like, and so on top of that, though, he has a real psychological competitive thing where there's obviously I just described round 6, but another game that I want to point to that was deeply psychological that the people looking at the computers didn't understand was the second win in that was oh my God, it's not listed in order, but
Queen A3 check, taking the pawn on A7.
Well, right, but before we get there, and I don't, we're doing this as a podcast, so we don't want to show positions, but it's very simple. Imagine a symmetrical position with the kings. White is castled and black is a king on E8, and black has just played H5 with the intention of mating white, and the computers were all like, oh, play rook E1 check, play C4. And Magnus plays Queen E1. Now let me just paint a picture here. Nepo thought for like 20 minutes on H5. To play a move like H5, you got to steel yourself. You got to be like, all right, it's my turn. I just got pushed over the edge of the earth and it's my turn to fight now. Well, you play the move and then Magnus says, you know what, buddy, I'm just going to play Queen E1. And now if you play King F8, I'm going to defang your position entirely with Bishop B4. The game isn't over then, but then you will be suffering. And instead of playing Queen E7 after Queen E1, which would be like the computer move, Magnus, I think, sensed that King F8 was going to go down.
Wow.
And because you sense like there's the psychological tension of building up to play a move like H5, and then Queen E1's like, really, buddy? And then he can't stop then Nepo couldn't stop his momentum that he had initiated psychologically within himself to play h5. Then plays king f8, bishop b4, white's better. It's not over, but white's better. And then we're going to get a real Magnus Carlsen grind him position, you know? Then welcome to the jungle, my friend. So the queen a3 mistake, honestly, that's another one where the computer people are like, oh, that's where it was lost. No, let me tell you where it was lost, buddy. Queen e1, king f8. Queen e1 was a dark move, not the objectively best move, but even better than that.
Interesting. And, you know, people were saying that about game 6 as well, because Nepo had a chance to trade queens earlier, but decides not to and go into this gf6 structure. And I think, well, the engine said, I think that that decision was kind of okay, but it's a very risky decision to like weaken your kingside structure with the queens still.
Absolutely, yeah. No, that was shocking.
Yeah,
yeah,
shocking.
Kind of interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think also that like after queen e1 check, that king f8 was a big mistake from Nepo. But it's interesting. It's interesting to wonder, like you do, that Magnus could have somehow predicted that was plausible, that Nepo would play king f8 to continue looking for an attack instead of playing queen e7. Mm-hmm. And I do believe that in these matches, the players get to know each other super well, right? So that Magnus could have an idea of what Nepo is going to do is very, very plausible to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I also want to point in terms of a turning point in the match. I feel like game 5, this is of course right before game 6, Nepo got a very nice position. I would say his best position ever in the match. And that was a move 20. He could have played c4. I was doing commentary here at the dojo with James Altucher, and James was like, what about c4? And we were looking at it. I was like, dang, that's a powerful move, man. And we saw a lot of stuff, man, that was clearly the better move. And then, there was someone, of course, at the comment, then that turned out to be the move the computer wanted to.
Of course.
We go to the commentary, the post game, and they mention c4, and there's this real regret where Nepo realizes he misses his chance. And Nepo talked later about creating chances in the event, but honestly, that was his last chance. That was the last chance right there in game 5. Big chance anyway. Yeah. And it wouldn't have been like c4 white's winning, but it definitely just I felt clear advantage.
Do you guys feel like Nepo underperformed in the match? Like it should have been closer? Or do you think the result was justified?
Oh, I mean, maybe the result is bigger than maybe it could have been. But, I think Chess Numbers, friend of the dojo, follow him on Twitter. He did a nice podcast with Ben Johnson, a Perpetual Chess podcast. Check that out. And he was saying, just based on the numbers, over a 14-game match, and by the numbers, I mean the rating differential, that because 14 games, the longer you go, the more that rating differential will show up in terms of the expected score. Mm-hmm. So just with the rating differential, you're looking at 90+% chance of Magnus winning the match at the get-go. Mm-hmm. So if you imagine it like that, winning the match 4-0 isn't an absurd prediction for the match, Yeah.
I think as far as like performance over or underperformance, it's really just a question of winning or losing the match. Like whether it's like 2 points or 3 points or 4 points doesn't make like that big a difference, right? Because you could say like, oh, Nepo started bleeding at the end because he was behind and couldn't catch up. But Magnus could have also just like agreed to draws and winning positions to win the match. Like you see that happen sometimes in matches. Mm-hmm. Also, let's say Nepo had switched from the Petrov to like the Najdorf. Right. And just gone for Magnus every game with white and black once he was down 1 point. He could have lost by like 5 or 6 points, or he could have maybe come back. Right. But had he lost by 6 points, I wouldn't say like, oh, he like did worse than by playing the Petrov and getting 1 or 2 more draws to his like score, right? It would have just been like an attempt to win the match. And his result wise, I think the only thing you can say is who won or lost. And the number of points beyond that, I don't think you can judge too much. So the only other thing I think you can really judge on is the quality of the play, which again, it's like hard. It's hard for somebody 400 points lower rated to judge like the quality of someone's play, right? But I personally, my own just sort of like subjective guessing at what I saw was that Nepo played pretty well. And, that he showed like pretty good toughness. And, I think he put up really great defense in game 6, which required a lot of stamina, which has been like a weakness of his in the past. I think he showed up a little bit stronger and more stamina than before, though of course that's still a big advantage of Magnus's. And I think that he put a bit of pressure on Magnus with his first 3 white games. And had chances on the black side of the Catalan game. So I think he generated some chances and played pretty well. And going into it, I thought Magnus's chances of winning the match were more like 90%.
Yeah.
And then watching the match unfold, or maybe even 95%, and watching the match unfold, I sort of got a glimpse of a world where Nepo could have won the match. So that he even gave me like a glimpse of the fact that there was that possibility, I think was pretty well done by him.
And one thing, there's a lot of things to talk about here. One thing I want to add to that about how the match has progressed is that Magnus himself made a good point in the press conference where he said, look, after a match they're talking about the draws, right? We talk about people messing up world championship matches through commentary. They're complaining about draws. In any case, so, there'd been a bunch of draws in the Karyakin and the Caruana matches. And anyways, Carlsen made the interesting point that in his match with Caruana, game 1, he was lost. And if Caruana had won that game, that would have opened the match wide open. Whereas if that game then is drawn as it was, then the match kind of tightens up more into this series of draws. And I think one of the beautiful things about Magnus and his experience that you can't understand unless you've been into a world championship is precisely that kind of interesting insight that, because, from the outside, you're like, well, it's a game is a game. But no, there's like something opens up after a 1-0, after a 1-0 in a match. And then people have to start taking a little bit more chances. And there might be something more like tilt going on, which is, I think, a lot of what happened to Nepo.
Yeah, a couple of matches started off with a quick win, like Topalov Anand started off 1-1 with 2 wins.
Yeah.
And I think the Kramnik-Leko match had a win in like round 2 for Kramnik. That like really, also a 2-Rick endgame, by the way, if I remember correctly. And then that kind of, those matches were very, very fighting. On the draw thing, I think you really have to look at the quality of the games because, I felt like the Carlsen-Caruana match was just 12 extremely interesting games. Carlsen-Karyakin I thought was also really interesting. Anand-Gelfand, for me, that match had quite a few lifeless draws where it was just kind of drawn without much fight or just out of the opening. Someone just showed really good prep and simplified, and then there wasn't much play. But yeah, for the most part, I thought all the first 5 games in this match, the first 5 draws, they were all very interesting. So yeah, complaining about the result is kind of silly with you guys. I think Nepo did quite reasonably. I mean, it's really hard to beat Magnus. And when I think about the games that Magnus lost, I usually remember the ones where he over pushes, and that's why he loses. I don't remember a lot of games where someone just outplays him start to finish. So he lost this game to Karyakin in their match. I remember him like really pushing very hard every single game leading up to that loss, and then pushing really hard and losing that one. But yeah, not a lot of players in the world that can just like beat Magnus. So very hard to expect that of Nepo.
Yeah. I mean, also, I've been following Magnus very closely for a long time, and I can only think of like 3 games that he's lost.
Just total.
So.
One thing I want to mention about Nepo and his performance, obviously David said you can't judge him being lower rated, but I think there is a sense in which I have an intuitive sense of his, let's call it a weakness. And that is, I think you guys can relate to this. If you're playing in a tournament, it's sometimes easy to make a move quickly. And we call that being impulsive, right? And that is definitely a weakness that I see in Nepo. I see it in myself. I see it in a lot of my students. It's hard to sit there and have the energy to really go through the specifics of a move instead of just kind of trusting your intuition. And I think to make a sports metaphor, when you're playing basketball and you're tired, the thing that you're going to do is you're going to take the easy shot from the outside. And I think when you're really pushing it in a chess game, you've got to sit on the hard decisions and really find depth, more depth in them than just making the impulsive move. And I know I've been guilty of that. And I know that especially like when you're exhausted, or even especially you're on tilt, you're going to be tending towards making that impulsive move. And the obviously the famous one that the computer people will have their narrative on, but I think is important to note here as one of the critical moments of the match is the third loss, where Jan felt like he was pressuring. This was the English opening. And I think it was around move 20 or something, 20 something. And he plays this disastrous C5. And what's so fascinating about that game to me was that in my naive take on the game, I thought white was better. And Nepo, interestingly, also thought he was better for like the whole game. Magnus was like, no, I'm fine. I'm fine. And so the interesting thing about C5 that I understand is that if you believe you're better in that position, C5 is the rook A4 had just been played. So you're threatening the pawn. The only really way to push the position, to push for an advantage, is to play C5. So if you believe that you are better in that position, by process of elimination, you'll say, well, C5 is my only chance for an advantage. So don't need to think about it. Let's roll. An impulsive decision, an example of an impulsive decision that comes about through Magnus playing beautiful defensive moves like Queen B4. And then all of a sudden, boom, game over, match over, gone. And that's an example of the impulsive moves. And I think there's a variety of positions where I felt like he moved impulsively. Sometimes those moves weren't bad, but I was just like, wait a second, boss, you're going to be moving that quickly in this position? And yeah, I think that's a definite problem for Nepo. And people had remarked on that even before this tournament, this match, that he had a problem of playing impulsively. And I think in a lot of ways, that's what separates him from the 2800 class. And, ultimately maybe is even like you need a stronger health, stronger constitution to sit there and really think on moves where you think you know the answer. But then Magnus, you watch him, dude, even when he was winning, he was conscientious about his moves, man. Conscientious. He wasn't just moving. Yeah, it was really impressive difference to me.
I think that when you have an evaluation in mind, like you said, it's like it has a huge effect on what variations you see or don't see, right? You just have this bias to confirm, and there are certain things you don't look for. Right. So if you think you're better and you see a line that looks good for you, it doesn't surprise you. You don't try as hard to refute the line. If you see a line that looks bad for you, you like fight like heck to find the improvement that makes it, match your evaluation. So walking around with a misevaluation is a super, super dangerous thing to do. And maybe one of the interesting things that leads to that in this match and elsewhere is that Magnus understands that he can defend a lot of positions that look bad to other people. Maybe not everybody, maybe some other people understand those positions too. But like that position looked bad to you, right? That he had that game. It looked bad to Nepo. It looked bad to me as well. And, following Magnus for years, I've seen him play a bunch of positions that I thought were just bad, I've seen him play like e6, d5 in the queen's gambit, and then maybe even c6 and just play bishop b4 check and trade his dark squared bishop. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like you can't do that. So like I see a lot of his games, and I think like, oh, that position looks bad. Oh, that position looks bad. Maybe he's just like, trying to get people out of book by playing bad moves on purpose or this or that, but like at some level, there've got to be a lot of positions that he knows how to defend that are encouraging to opponents that other people don't understand that it's just okay. Mm-hmm. And I think there's probably like a whole set of positions that he understands in a way that a lot of other people don't. And then this is a way that it, can backfire on Nepo or others.
Yeah. He lures people in, like Jesse said. Magnus is evil. He is inherently just an evil person inside. During the game. Outside, yeah, he's cool. But like during the game, he tricks people. He's very clever. Well, let's rate some key factors if you guys are down. All right. I think we should start just like overall players perform. Maybe we could give people like an A through F grade. Like, how would you rate each player?
I think Magnus is in his prime, dude. I don't know how long it's going to last, but he's in his prime. And I think Nepo played like the 27-40 player that I think he is. That's what I think. That's my, that's my, yeah. Magnus, wow. Dude. Magnus is amazing. Incredible.
I would give Magnus an A because he won the match without losing a game. Was never really in trouble from what I could see. And I would give Nepo like a B-. I think he did okay. He definitely could have done better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's fair. I'm going to give Nepo a B. I mean, there's a big unanswered question, but I don't know whether we should address it like while rating the players or while rating their teams. Maybe you can tell me where you want me to talk about it, Kostya. But like, to me, the big what if about the match is like, what if Nepo didn't play the Petrov as black? So I don't know if we should rate Nepo for that decision or the team or like, the team and performance, which is coming up.
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to assign that yet to just one. It seems like it's just everyone's. I'm sure everyone had a role in that decision. But yeah, how would you rate the teams?
But yeah, so I mean, if I'm just rating his play, I'll stick with my B.
Okay.
If we want to rate the teams, I think the Magnus team out-prepared. So I would give the Magnus team an A. And the Nepo team, I'm heavily thinking about the decision to play the Petrov, and to play 1e4, because I would have also played not 1e4 against Magnus. So I think that they chose the wrong openings. It seemed like Nepo was like well prepared as far as like predicting some of what Magnus would do, knowing a bunch of moves, like blitzing out the openings like super confidently. But like if you can't play those positions better than Magnus, it's no use to like know the position, but it's like a bad choice, right? Like so I would give the team as a whole, which I guess partially still includes Nepo, I would give them a C because I don't think the opening choices were right. And I think especially once he's like down a point and like the openings aren't working, there should have been a plan B. And I remember we talked about this before the match, right? And we said, of course, you've got like different plans for like if you're ahead, if you're equal, or if you're behind. Like you've got 3 different scenarios and potentially a different approach, including different openings for those. I mean, he just kept playing the Petrov when he's like behind. And he kept playing 1e4 when it wasn't threatening Magnus very much. So I rate poorly actually the choice of openings played. I think once he was in the games, he played to his abilities.
Yeah, I guess I'll just add that I think one of the beautiful things about a World Championship match is that a lot of times an opening comes out of it, and that influences everybody down the food chain. And the Sveshnikov that Magnus played against Fabi, a lot of beautiful new ideas there, and everybody and their mom started playing it after that. And here, I think what we're going to see actually is we're going to see people moving from the Berlin approach to E4 to now a Marshall approach to E4. And one of the things that Magnus did that is a little bit to do with the team, but also just to do with Magnus, is the decision on A4 to play Rook B8. Just this very solid defensive move, after which you got to believe that White's a little better, but that if he has a sense of how that position works, which he did, then it's like, no, you might think you're better, your buddy, but you will not beat me in this position. And so that was an interesting, really thing about the match. One of the reasons I think matches have such a different level in terms of openings than normal tournaments, because you're going to have to face it again. And then he kept trying to slam his head against that Berlin, or excuse me, that Marshall, with the anti-Marshall, and it just didn't work, man. It just didn't work. And yeah, could he have done other openings? Kind of. The C4 thing I was happy to see, but it didn't really do anything. The Petrov, I mean, he got mostly equal positions, and even when it went wrong with the Queen E1 move, he still was, technically okay. So I don't think it, ultimately it wasn't the openings that lost him the battle. Yeah. Oh, so I don't have strong feelings about him having. Yeah, it's an interesting question.
It is interesting.
I don't have strong feelings in the openings.
Yeah, there's also a good point made in the chat. Magnus played a lot more dynamically in the opening against Fabi than he did against Nepo. And thinking about it, just like overall, like, yeah, Magnus definitely felt like he was trying to make the positions as dynamic as possible against Fabi and take him into really sharp positions, especially with black taking on a lot of risk. Against Nepo, it felt like he's just trying to play like really simple, quiet positions and then just outplay him, grind him out somewhere. And I think that maybe it's partly, well, of course it's Magnus, but it's probably his overall like team's approach and their strategy. I bet they probably consider that quite a bit. And actually, I want to say there have been some really interesting video series on Chess24 where they've had like Peter Heine and Fressinet like discuss Magnus's approach to like some of his previous matches. And yeah, they really they think about it very conceptually, and I think they're very deliberate and intentional about what they do. I feel like Magnus on Twitter and his team sometimes they have this image like they're always just like having fun and playing blitz and like too weak, too slow, this kind of thing. But they're really, really very, I think, specific about how they approach the match and very careful and professional about it. Now they have all this experience as well, so it's very hard to beat them. For Nepo, of course, this is his first match, and for his team, maybe first time they're all working together. I'm not sure, but probably they've never done like a huge world championship match all together.
Right.
Not together, but I mean, like Karyakin is like certainly has relevant experience,
but not like as a second, helping prep someone. Like Magnus, he reminds me of like the New England Patriots, just like a well-oiled machine. It's like Tom Brady, and everyone's just kind of helping and supporting, and all the the characters are pretty much the same. It's interesting. I saw on Twitter actually they posted a photo with, it was Peter Heine, Fressinet, Dubov, and I think Jordan Van Forest as like the team. Which is interesting because like Dubov, it wasn't clear was going to be helping Magnus. So I guess he was.
Yeah. When you talk about like a well-oiled machine, like they even know what time zone to be in so that they can work while Magnus is asleep. That's part of like the well-oiled machine. Yeah,
Jan Gustafsson's contribution, figuring out the right time zone so they can be in like Thailand while they work the match. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's important, right? I mean,
I think it's a great idea.
Plays, you play while he sleeps, he wakes up, the work's ready.
Yeah, I mean, I was reading the Anand files, how Anand seconds had to work, through the night every single day, like got no sleep. It was like a traumatic experience for them. So yeah, it totally makes sense now. You can communicate with the team remotely that they would be working. I don't know where they were for this match, but yeah, their idea has always been that they're in a time zone where they can work during their day while Magnus is sleeping. So somewhere across the world. Like I think against Caruana, they were in Thailand, if I remember correctly, but I'm not sure. All right, how do you guys rate the venue, Dubai?
Oh, it seemed beautiful, dude. It seemed great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Looked fine to me. I don't know.
Yeah.
Looked very nice.
I wasn't there. That
Yeah.
was the one part about, that was the one part I wasn't in on.
Yeah. I wasn't there either. Maybe we just don't know and can't comment too much.
Yeah, it looked like there was a lot of room. I was at London for a little while. There wasn't a ton of room there for spectators and press and stuff. And so, yeah, I'm not sure if they would have had enough room back then for everyone that wanted to attend the match.
Yeah, I just want to say something obvious. One of the beautiful things about the online world is, when I was a kid and Karpov-Kasparov was going on, you'd wait months until you figured out what was going on in that thing. And you had no access to the hidden dramas of the match as it was unfolding. And now it's just like, oh man, the venue honestly could be anywhere, but the game is, worldwide people are covering this thing. And that's what's so cool about it. It's almost like the venue it's more than just the place itself. It's the entire internet and the ecosystem around the match, which made it awesome, dude. Awesome. I loved it.
Yeah, it was great just to see how many different commentary teams there were. And we could just jump to rating the commentary. I mean, it was there's just so many people doing it. It was like Caruana for Chess.com, Kramnik's Fiddler doing it, Geary was doing it. I mean, it was just people were spoiled for choice, of course, which I think was really, really good. And Anand was doing it for FIDE, of course, like the official world, the commentary. I mean, this one might have been the best ever. I feel like Carlsen-Caruana was also really good a few years ago, but yeah.
I was curious, not just if you thought the commentary was great, but if you had any thoughts about which commentary was the best, did you see any of them, and did you have a preference of where to go yourself?
That's the unfortunate thing, is that I just didn't have time to I would love to watch every 6 hours of everyone.
Yeah.
But it was just not possible. Also, I was waking up, after the games were more or less over, so I would only then catch the highlights later on. Yeah. If I could just watch live, I think I'd probably choose Kramnik's Fiddler. I think that would be my choice.
What are you talking about me, buddy? What about the Dojo? Get out of here.
I would tune into Jesse. I would wake up, tune into our channel first. I'm serious. That's what I would do. I'm saying if I could watch from the beginning, definitely Kramnik's Fiddler.
I mean, I think basically the only game I got to watch live was Game 6 with Jesse. So that was the one choice I made. I would have loved to try out some of the others. And that's, again, one of my big regrets with the match, is that I couldn't watch it all. One thing I saw these little clips on chess.com of funny things with Fabi, cooking eggs for Hess and them waiting to pick him up in the airport and stuff like that. I thought that stuff was hilarious. So I enjoyed that piece of chess.com's work. I would give that a solid A, those little Fabi skits.
Yeah, once in a lifetime chance there. And how do you feel about the Twitter coverage overall? Because there are so many people out there tweeting about the match. Do you think they helped the match? Was there any disservice? If people, let's say, promoting the false narrative or complaining about draws. I think that's one thing we all kind of hate, is the people that complain about draws. I don't know. Anything else?
I felt like there were only kind of controversies. There was a bunch of people upset at some of the questions in
the press conferences, of course.
Press conferences. But honestly, I didn't take any offense to that. And I thought one of the cool things actually about the press conferences was it wasn't just chess people asking the questions, right? It was just people from, let's say, Norway or someplace that just were there and they had no idea about chess, and we're going to ask whatever they were going to ask. And that's cool, because that's the full spectrum of people watching the match. And I talked to some people who knew nothing about the match, and they were getting it from sites that I had never even heard of, and I was like, what site? And, they would be telling me stuff. They just, Google it and they're going to find some, this, and it just turned me on to the fact of how big the ecosystem is out there of different people covering the match, from like Nate Silver at 538 to The Guardian to all these other people. Huge disparate voices, some of which have no idea about even how the pieces move, which was fine. I thought that was great too.
Yeah. Oh, actually, I will say one thing about the commentary ratings that I forgot. Somebody in stream mentioned that they had an eval bar on the chess.com commentary.
Yeah.
So even though I found the skits with Fabi to be funny, and even though I love Danny and Robert, I think they're really great commentators, I literally would not have ever watched their broadcast because of the eval bar. That would have just been like a hard, like, I can't watch it. Like I'm just not allowed to, not for 1 second. That's just a disqualifier. So no matter how great they are, that kind of makes their commentary unwatchable, which I guess is kind of like an F for the actual.
Well, most of them were using it. Like Anish was using it. There was all kinds of people using the eval bar.
So anybody who had an eval bar, I would unfortunately have to give them an F, even if they're a great commentator.
I'm with you. It's super annoying, and it's not for us, like the eval bar. I would still watch the commentary though if I had like unlimited time. I think even with the eval bar, anything like Fabi says about a chess position or like Anish, I think that's still 100% worth it. But shout out to Anand, who I believe no eval bar.
Right.
Just doing it by hand. And yeah, actually Anand as well, his commentary I've always found to be really, really insightful. Like he just doesn't hold back. We talked about this with David when we were covering Game 6. I really hate that they have the players together for the press conference. I think after the game, the players should just be separated and asked.
No, buddy, what are you talking about? Yeah. That's part of the psychological drama. Let them sit there together. What are you kidding me? Come on.
What drama? It's just awkward. It's just so awkward. Magnus, do you feel bad for your opponent? Like what is this? Like
now we could say maybe that's a bad question, but the fact that they got to sit together afterwards and have the psychological composure to hold it together. Oh yeah, that's great.
Well, what's a good question then, Jesse? I just don't. It's like, other than talking about the game, I don't understand what they're gonna say when the other person's right next to them.
Well, I think I think there's the people who don't know anything about the game. They want to know about, like, the only access they have to it is like, okay, Nepo, talk to me what it feels like to lose. That's their insight into the game. Let them ask the question. Whereas for me, I was fascinated when they were talking about giving a sense before they had seen the computer about what they thought the evaluation of the position was. I thought that was amazing. And I want them to be side by side. I want to see like Magnus's reaction when Nepo says that he's better. I was like, oh yeah, this is great, man. This is great.
Yeah, ask them for their thoughts on the game. I don't know, maybe I see your point. It is nice when the players are kind of like back and forth bantering about the game, but a lot of them don't want to do that with their opponent. And I feel like, honestly, it's not wise to do that if like you're gonna give something away, like you're gonna play this guy for the next 12 games. So I don't know, showing that you like calculated some line fully or that you didn't calculate the line fully, I think that's kind of a big risk. Like, you're giving away a lot of info to the opponent.
Or let me put it, imagine this moment. After game 6, it's 12:30 at night, their time. They're sitting there in the press conference, and Magnus openly says, I wanted to take him all the way. I wanted to take him the distance. So not only are you're not going to conceal that, you're going to tell him exactly what went down.
Okay, but Jesse,
that was fantastic.
Jesse,
we're going to let you know. We're going to let you know how I did you.
Here's my main point, Jesse, because I feel like I'm going to flip this around on you. I think you would get a lot more of those moments if the players were separated. I don't think Nepo has to be right there for that moment to be awesome. If Magnus says that privately, that moment still goes viral, and Nepo will still see it, and maybe we'll even get his reaction in the future. But Anand is never going to say that with his opponent sitting next to him. He might say that when he's getting interviewed privately. And I would say the same for like MVL, Ding Loren, Caruana. All these guys are sheepish. They don't want to like talk or gloat or say anything when their opponent is right there. I don't know.
Yeah.
I felt the same thing. Much more likely to talk and say something real.
I think Anand would never even tell you that. Certainly not until the match was over. He's not going to reveal his strategy.
He would never say that. It was a master psychological stroke, though. And we got to also say, as a shout out, our friend of the dojo, Mike Klein, was doing these right after the match. He would catch him. He caught Nepo at least a bunch of times and asked like right away, you know, his impressions before they even went to the press conference. So there was also the asking alone apart as well. You know.
Yeah, I think that's cool. I just think we've had very few of these moments where the players actually said something of use in the press conference, and most of it is just torture for the player. They just play this 8-hour game, and now they're asked like, what's their favorite fast food joint, you know. Like,
let him ask, dude. Let him ask. Let him ask.
Oh no, terrible.
Yeah.
I
will say that like I heard a lot more about the questions than about the answers. People are like, this was a dumb question. This was a dumb question. I never even heard what the answers were. So for whatever they did, none of the answers they got out of the players were anything that carried, you know, that they got to me. This is the first I'm hearing an answer is what you guys are talking about now with Magnus saying that he wanted to go to the distance. I hadn't heard a single answer relayed. So they didn't succeed at bringing out too much from what I can tell.
Questions stole the show, unfortunately.
Yeah. Also, let's just say in even recent World Championship history, it's not always the case that both players show up. You know, there's been several press conferences that were missed after a loss. And that's kind of cool too. Are you going to show up? Are you not going to show up? Oh, great. I love it, man. Press conference is one of the best parts of the show for me as a fan.
Oh yeah, no, another great example. We probably would have heard what Magnus actually thought about that game he lost to Karyakin if he was just interviewed immediately and away from his opponent. At least immediately. I think he left because it was like getting delayed. But if he was just interviewed, he would have probably said something. And okay, if he leaves, he leaves. But then we get that same moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, okay. I mean, that's just my thought, and I think we'd get a lot more interesting answers if the player didn't have his opponent right next to them. Just like, you know, when everything moved online and the players had to play on Zoom cameras, we saw a lot more reactions, even though they're still on camera. The fact that you're not in front of your opponent, we saw a lot of the players we saw their blunder face, and you know, we saw a lot more emotion through the virtual cam, because you're in your room, you think you're alone. It's just so much more natural to give your genuine emotion there. So same thing.
But you're not going to argue that we should now be having the World Championship by Zoom, I hope, Kostya. Oh no, Kostya, don't tell it. Don't say it, buddy.
No, he's like, if you want to revive this archaic and pointless tradition of having a world championship match, you better at least do it in your pajamas at home so we can see the real personality come through.
It's not a bad idea. It's your idea. It's not a bad idea. Okay. Well, maybe final question.
Yeah.
How long do we think Magnus can last?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. One of the dojo talks that I'm going to pre-advertise, we're going to talk about aging in chess. As an old dude, I have some at least anecdotal evidence about it. And one of the things that we got to say about chess in my lifetime, it's gotten much younger. There used to be a lot more people over 40 at the top, and now there just isn't. And prior to this, I thought I was beginning to see the first bit of cracks in Magnus's play, but you know, now after this match, it's like, oh no, he's still at his prime. He's at 28.65. He's close to the top. His top, you know, he's getting there. And how long will it last? It's hard to say. And then part of it is the challengers, like Will Ferrugia. Like, for example, I think Fabi and Ding could definitely be challengers, but I don't think their performance is ever going to go significantly north of 2,800, like their performance rating north of 2,800. Ferrugia, maybe he could be 2,850, you know, and that's what you would, you know. So there's that question, but also, of course, just with every year, you got to imagine that Magnus's ability to retain his edge gets harder to maintain. And one of the things about Magnus and the way he plays is like to go take somebody out in an 8.5 hour game or whatever it is, you need like youth. You need some youth to do that, man. And the way he plays, right, with the very exact end game play, I think you need youth. So like, is there going to, when are we, it's not a question of if, it's like, when are we going to start seeing the cracks in that performance?
Yeah. I think that the cracks we've seen in Magnus so far might have been more to do with motivation than with age for now. Right? Because like at some point when there's no, I mean, there's all kinds of psychological aspects to being number 1 or number 2 or world champion or anything, right? Like, I think at some point, you know, different world champions have had different psychological issues. You know, Fischer was probably scared to play a match with Karpov, right? Despite how good he was. And I think Magnus may have lost some motivation because he was just winning and winning and winning. But the thing is but you point out that you need like a challenger, because the gap between Magnus and the best players over the last 10 years has just been too big. Even when he lost 40 points off his rating, right? From 2880 to 2840.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, if Caruana beats him in this match, he could even pass him by rating. Even when he lost like 40 points and everyone's like, oh, is it done for him? He was still the highest rated player in the world, you know, like Magnus in like full on tanking was still the best player in the world. And that's the truth. He never wasn't the best player in the world, you know, and, you know, he got his mojo back and the gap is like, you know, 50 plus points, which at that level, it's like, you know, it's like a spoonful of black hole, the density of like chess ability and knowledge that he has, that like gap of 50 points. It's like, you can't even like measure it for other people. So he needs a different challenger, you know? And so part of how long he'll keep it is just like, who's on a trajectory that they could like potentially play like him.
Yeah. And actually, and we give a plug again for the press conference. He was asked at this final one about Firouzja, and he said that his performance at the Grand Swiss and then now the European Team Championship, he was like, yeah, that's what's motivating me right now. I was like, oh, that's a good answer, Magnus. That's a good answer, buddy. And he does. He needs somebody like Firouzja to make him a little scared at night, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's going to make him work. And I think I think for years now, it's been like, when you're at that level, what is going to motivate you to grow your game in some way? And then like even try to imagine for Magnus, how could he grow his game? Hard to imagine, but maybe Firouzja is the one to push him to the next level. You know?
I mean, so far he's the only one who's shown that he could, right? And even then it's like, okay, like maybe he could play the match with Magnus in 2 years, right? Like maybe Firouzja at his best with the current system would have a 50% chance to qualify, right? Because it's just such a grueling system. I mean, I'm very bullish on Firouzja, but you know, maybe he's got a 50% chance to qualify. Then maybe he's got a 50% chance to win the match. You know, then he has to wait another 2 years and qualify again. Like, no matter how good Firouzja is, like, it still feels like it could, like, there could be a few more years for Magnus. And if it requires somebody other than Firouzja, and you have to look younger, because there's no guarantee that Firouzja hits 2860 in his life, right?
Yeah.
If you have to look past Firouzja, then who's your next challenger? Nobody there has yet proven that they're 2,800 plus among the upcoming crop of prodigies, though there are some options, but probably all of them would need like 4 years as well to be 2,800.
Yeah, it's going to be a while.
Yeah, you never know. You might see some other players that are already known kind of take a leap up, like I could see Van Forest actually getting to 2,800 if he took another jump up, and I feel like actually Dubov has room to grow as well. He could be one of the elites. Maybe
players
not
from Magnus's own team, but their trajectory, they're already over 20.
No, I know.
They should be happy to get to 2,750, I think.
But you know, a couple of years ago, no one was thinking Nepo would ever play a world championship match. He was just like...
I still think it's a surprise that he played a
I
world
still think
championship.
it's a surprise. That's right, buddy.
Yeah. No,
okay, so I want to give a shout out. I think this kid Esipenko has a shot. I think this kid I can't pronounce his name. Abu Tarasov or whatever. That kid has a shot. And as a dark horse in this candidates tournament, I don't think Duda should be underestimated. The guy's been playing some very interesting chess,
could take
working
a step
really
up.
hard. So that guy, I could imagine doing something at the candidates tournament as well.
Okay.
And we got to see is Ding going to qualify, for example. Ding has like has a small chance of qualifying. That dude needs to get on it. This is kind of his last chance for Ding here.
Yeah. I think that Richard Rapport has a great chance to hit 2,800. I think he could. Fair, yeah. I think that he could be like in the conversation of top 5 players over the next like 5 or so years. And I think if you look younger, one of the most talented players, period, is Arjun Erigaisi.
Yeah, I think in like 10 years, right? It's just gonna like all the Indian juniors are gonna be growing up.
Like, the thing is, I think Erigaisi started later than some of the other prodigies. So he's like 18, and then these other Indian GMs are like 15 or 16. So like you think of them automatically because they're younger. So you assume it's like that trajectory. But I think Erigaisi might have started playing a little bit later than them, and his talent is just, and the quality of his play is just insane. And I don't know if anybody noticed because of the World Championship, but he won the this like Tata Rapid version in India like a week ago, and he's like as good as Levon Aronian at Rapid Chess already.
Yeah.
To just give you like a sense of where he's at right now, and his classical's a bit behind that, but I think he's somebody who could like challenge for world champion. But again, it would have to be like 6 years from now, probably, for him.
Yeah, they all need a bump. Personally, I think Nihal Sarin, I don't know. I feel like he's just got a ton of potential. He would be, if I had to choose one kid, he would be the one. But yeah, Firouzja, I mean, so strong, so impressive. I feel like we'll definitely see him either in 2 years or 4 years against Magnus.
How long do you think Nihal would need to play a match for the World Championship?
Maybe 4 to 6 years.
Okay. I think 4 is really aggressive. I think
4 would be but I don't know. I mean, things are accelerating, so who knows?
They are. Yeah.
Who knows how it goes?
If I had to guess, I would on average give Magnus another 4 years.
Right.
Yeah, I mean it's like a bell curve, right? There's like maybe a 20% chance that he loses in 2 years, and a 30 or 40%, and maybe like a 30% chance he loses in 4 years, and then another 30% chance he loses in 6 years, something like that.
To be clear, let's just do, I like what Chess Numbers is doing. Imagine it's a match of 14 games, and to do, like some people were saying, okay, they thought the match, there was a 60% chance that Magnus was going to win, and only a 40% chance that Nepo would win, which I thought was insane. And then Chess Numbers correctly pointed out, to have that over 14 games, that's like an ELO difference of 10 to 15 points, That's why we got up to the 90+ percentage by the difference that we had here. So when we say that Magnus has a 20% chance to lose next time around, that's imagining that someone is, well north of 2,800 as the challenger, which could be, but Magnus right now 2,865. So if you come challenge him and you're 2,815, dude, your chance is still not good, still not great, and that's the actual difference between you. That's tough. I think if Firouzja makes the jump, then we have a chance in 2 years. But otherwise, I can easily see Magnus winning for 10 more years, dude. And then the decline was going to set in, but we see that his match experience is incredible. It's incredible.
For 10 more years, he'd be 40.
Yeah, I know.
That would be pretty old for a world champion in our era.
Yeah, I mean, but think about Kasparov, man. That guy went from 83, 84 to 1999, and that could have gone further. That could have gone longer than that.
If he just played against Shirov like he was supposed to.
That's right.
Really messed it up there.
Okay, I mean, there were no engines, no computers back then, right? I mean, just getting started, right? But today's generation, I feel like they're learning at such an accelerated rate that, to the last 15 years, I think is remarkable today.
Yeah.
So
They're
Magnus
learning at an
needs, like,
accelerated rate,
more.
but that stuff you got to do to get past 2,800. I don't know that there's any shortcuts at that point. Like,
yeah,
it's tough.
maybe not. But so yeah, classical chess dead, unfortunately. No more intrigue, no more interest. Sorry, everyone. No, just kidding. I think we'll call it there, guys. What do you say?
Yeah, beautiful.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. That'll be it. Make sure to subscribe, follow to the podcast. We're going to be posting it on YouTube with the video version, as well as all the main podcast platforms as an audio version. And yeah, thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you guys next time.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Look forward to Dojo Talks Carlsen versus Faruja in 2 years.
That's right.